Hi, everybody. Meeta and Tosh here again. We're doing the follow-up questions to the Q&A session that we did today, the 3rd of April at 1 o'clock. Welcome back, Tosh.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. We're having a little bit of a time lag, so hopefully that will fix itself. We thought we'd get this Q&A session out straight away, or the follow-up, because we actually had some technical challenges within the session itself. So we're hoping we can bring you all the answers really clearly in this 15-20 minute summary.
We literally just did the webinar this afternoon. For anybody that doesn't know, it was our second session. We're doing 4 sessions, one every single Friday. This one we did earlier this afternoon was on the next steps for the furloughed employees. We also dealt with redundancies, and we also dealt with motivating employees and thinking about employee well-being. And this is the follow-up video to answer all of the questions that were brought up there. We just didn't have enough time in that 30-minute slot to address everything. So it was Meeta's idea in the first instance to just do a follow-up video every single time so that everything is addressed effectively.
Absolutely. Also, just to point out, I did give some incorrect information. I said the next session would be next Friday, but next Friday is Friday. Yeah, it's a bank holiday. So we're running the next session on the Thursday, the 9th of April at 1 o'clock.
Yes.
So please do register. We hope you find these useful. And without further ado, I'm going to bring up the questions so we can start getting the answers out.
Yeah, great. Let's dive in.
Fantastic. Okay, so Tosh, are employees who furlough entitled to company cars and mobiles? So can I answer this one? Because I like to demonstrate that I've also absorbed.
Yeah, cool. Go ahead.
So officially, furloughing means that when they're furloughed, because there's no work, they're only entitled up to 80% from the government. Companies are allowed to top up, but they're not expected to. And likewise, they can give the other benefits if they want to, but they don't have to. Is that right?
Exactly right. There's no legal obligation for them to do that whatsoever. It's
Good.
really important people know that.
Great. But if there's an employee at home who has a company car sitting outside, if the boss says that's fine, you carry on as normal, then that's okay, even though they're furloughed.
Correct.
Good. Right. So the next question is, what is the process for people who joined a perm contract after the furlough cutoff date? Which is the 28th of February, right? The furlough cutoff date.
I suppose the question, correct. The furlough cutoff date is that. It's 28th of February. It says, what is the process for people who joined a permanent contract after the furlough cutoff? So I'm assuming the process you're referring to is the furlough process rather than a redundancy process or anything else. And the answer is that they're not eligible.
No. So then
presumably they started. It's for people that are on the payroll from the 28th of February. So if they're not on the payroll from after that, the choices are to either they're able to kept on, or if there isn't enough work to keep them on, then they're going to be made redundant. And obviously, less than 2 years employment, whilst they're made redundant, they're not entitled to redundancy pay, and they're not entitled to unfair dismissal rights. They're only entitled to their notice pay and any holiday accrued during that period if you can't keep them on.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Next question. We were talking about the practical steps for furloughing somebody if they're in a position to be furloughed.
So the first thing to do is to make sure that you agree with the employee that they're furloughed. It's an agreement. It's not an obligation, and it's not something we can force on the employee. That agreement needs to be expressed, that means in writing, so that you can show the HMRC that when they were furloughed and why. Obviously, we know what the definition of the furloughed employees. Now we've done that to death. They're sitting at home. They've got nothing to do, or they can't do any work. Okay. So the bottom line is get an agreement in place. In that agreement, you need to be clear to the employee what they're getting, which is that they'll only be paid 80% of their salary, capped at $2.5 grand, and that includes national insurance contributions and auto enrollment pension.
Yeah.
Or if they're paying full salary, well, then you'll know that they're getting their full benefits, but the company will only be able to claim back what I've just said that the employee is entitled to.
Okay. Now,
sorry, that was number one. Once you get that agreed, now the next stage is we need to get the information ready for the HMRC. Talk to your accountants. But we haven't got the online portal up and running from the HMRC yet. We're expecting that by the end of this month, and then we'll have the full process lined out, exactly what needs to be done, what needs to be provided. At the moment, we're just thinking what they need to prove what we need to prove that they're furloughed employees. Those are the steps.
Thank you. I think when the the computer program comes up. What do you call it? A portal. When the portal is created, I think
online portal, correct.
Yeah, when the online portal is created, I think we should do a little talk through for everyone. I think that would be really helpful.
Definitely, we will do a step-by-step guide on exactly what to do. It's very straightforward. But
I'm looking forward to that lesson myself. So, okay, do we still get pay slips when we're furloughed? We do, right?
Yeah. Well, the idea is that you're putting it through the payroll. It's a reimbursement scheme in the first instance. So that's how you prove to the HMRC what you paid during that period. So yes, the answer is yes, it goes through the payroll. If you can't afford to pay them, then obviously that's what will go through the payroll for those circumstances. And then you'll have to show to the HMRC why you couldn't pay them, why you couldn't get any business loan or support to finance it in the meantime, or whatever you need to show why you couldn't pay.
Yeah. Okie doke. Thank you. Now, next question we have here is from Yvette, and Yvette asks, as an employer, can we ask employees to start taking their annual leave as we would normally? Well, I'm not sure normally we tell employees when they can take annual leave. Some companies do. Some companies have policy. So what happens if somebody's furloughed?
You hit the nail on the head. I didn't know what normally meant. So if they've got a scheme or a custom and practice where they are normally requiring employees to take holiday during certain times, I don't see why that should change. It shouldn't change. Okay. Otherwise, you cannot, just like in any other circumstances, you cannot force employees to take leave. They take it when they want to be able to take it. Normally, you can only force them to take it within the holiday year. And if they fail to use it in that holiday year leave period, then they lose it. But now what the government has done is obviously extend that carryover period for 2 years. So the issue will be, well, what happens when they all decide to take their holiday, at the end of this crisis? Yeah. Well, the reality will be employers will just act reasonably about refusing or accepting whatever holiday requests are made. There's still needs in the business. It's the same law that applies right now or before the scheme was in place. Yeah. Just because employees ask for holidays doesn't mean the employer has to say yes. Yeah. The refusal just has to be reasonable.
Got you. Fantastic. Right. Does your employer have to keep you on after being furloughed? That's from Louise.
No, it depends. No or yes, it depends is the standard answer. Depends means, well,
I'm
sorry, I don't even like that answer. I'll change it completely. So what I was saying is this. If they are less than 2 years service, you don't have an obligation to keep them on anyway. Yeah. If they are more than 2 years service, employees have unfair dismissal rights, which means you have to have a fair reason and a fair process anyway. Okay. So the question was, which one was it? Sorry, was it Louise?
Does your employer have to keep you on after being furloughed?
So if they're still eligible and they're more than 2 years, I'm going to say yes, because otherwise they have unfair dismissal rights. If they are not eligible or if they've got less than 2 years, then the answer is no, you don't have to.
And if you don't want to, even though it is more than 2 years, it would have to be around a redundancy process, which is where you look at the availability of the role and whether there's work for that person or not.
For redundancy to be fair in law for employees with over 2 years service, it has to be the last reasonable resort.
Okay.
So the issue at the moment is if employees are eligible to be furloughed, well, that must be the last resort before redundancy. So if they're eligible for it and employees agree to it, then they stay on the furlough. If they're eligible for it but they don't agree to it, then you make them redundant. If they're not eligible, well, then you're going to make them redundant because we can't keep them on anymore.
Yeah. Okie doke. That's clear. So now there's a question. We talked about this actually in the session around the fact that furloughed employees can be continue to be trained, can attend sessions with their colleagues that aren't furloughed, hopefully creating a bit of a team camaraderie feel and letting them feel engaged in the organization. So the question here from Isabel is, if a furloughed employee is asked to train, do they get paid extra for this?
They don't get paid extra. They might be entitled to full pay for training because the furlough relates to salaries and in respect of reclaiming it during the furloughed leave period. But obviously they're not. The phrase is that they're on leave effectively, or they're on leave of absence. So if they're not on leave of absence because they're doing training, which is for the benefit of the company, then there's an argument to say that they should receive their pay during that period.
Yeah. All right. Good. So next question is, would it be more sensible for me to start all the effective staff I'm going to put on furlough at the same time, or to stagger? You did cover this actually. Do you want to give us a quick synopsis?
Yeah, so staggering the furlough process means you've got some people that are working right now that keep the business operational, and some that you don't need, but you're going to put them on furlough because there's no work for them to do. So it only makes sense to do what's right in the interests of your business. So if staggering makes sense because we need more people to work and some furloughed, and then we need to furlough more as time goes on, then we do that. Yeah. If it doesn't make sense to do that, then you'll do whatever makes sense. So it's a very generic kind of answer, I appreciate, but that is the reality of it. You furlough them as you need to according to the needs of the business. The issue will be, I suppose, is the employees that are working may not like the fact that they're working and other people are getting 80% of their salary for not working. But that is the reality of the situation. Yeah.
And actually, hopefully they feel the value of being asked to stay on in full employment and being paid for working.
Yeah, and don't forget 80% or 2,500. Whereas those that are working, ready, willing and able to work, whether it's home working or working in the office or wherever else, they get full pay still.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely feels better if you're, I think, working and engaged rather than not knowing what's around the corner.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because for employees that don't have money coming in, and they might have work to do, but they can't afford to pay staff, even though staff might be willing to help to see if we can get them out of this hole, they won't be furloughed, they won't be entitled to the benefits. So they're better off not working. That's the catch-22 we're in, I think.
Yeah. I actually had somebody say, can I carry on doing a bit of what I was doing? And I said, no, you can't be, you can't be doing any work at all apart from some training. So that's the reality of it.
Don't pick up the phone, don't do an email related to work, don't do any revenue generating work, anything of that nature. That's what we're talking about. Do nothing.
That's how furloughing works. Yeah. Right. Do we know how to furlough employees with salary sacrifice in place of payroll?
So it's not, the question is phrased the wrong way. The way we need to look at it is, well, what is covered for furlough? We know what the steps are. We just covered it now when we answered Sahar's question. The process is you agree it with them, you make it express, and in that agreement, you let them know that they're only going to be paid 80% of their salary from now, or that they'll only get reimbursed. They'll get their full salary, but the company are going to claim back 80%. Whichever way you want to do it, it's got to be, if you're going to vary the normal terms and conditions, it's got to be in the actual contract. So it includes national insurance contributions and up to 3%, which is the automatic pension contribution scheme, auto enrollment, sorry. So not so much do we know what to do with the salary sacrifices, it's up to 3%.
Yeah, got you. Right. Next question. If it's ambiguous if furloughed employees can go and get additional jobs to help plug the gap in their income. Yeah, you did cover this off as well, didn't you? Just clarify that again. It's a bit confusing.
So you are furloughed, which means you're not supposed to do any work in relation to revenue generation for your employer. It follows you're being paid for that period though, because you're being furloughed. So if you're doing any work outside of your contracted hours, I don't see that being a problem. If you're doing any work inside your contracted hours, your normal contracted hours, well then either it needs to be voluntary or it will be unacceptable, because otherwise you're getting paid twice for that period of time that you would normally be working.
Yeah, that's understood. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because sometimes people will have a day job and an evening job, but they couldn't have two revenue streams from the same hours, essentially, in practice.
Correct. For example, if the two people if somebody's furloughed from two jobs and the jobs are, if the combined incomes are more than 80% is more than $2,500 a month.
Yeah.
In theory, they could get $5,000 a month for those two jobs.
Yeah. So the answer is not if it's in your normal working hours that you've been furloughed from.
That's correct. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Right, what about if somebody is due back from maternity leave? So say on the 20th of February, they were on maternity leave, due to come back early March or in this period of time. What would happen to somebody like that? Could they be furloughed?
Absolutely. Again, the key requirement is, are they on the payroll from the 28th of February? Next key requirement to determine whether they're furloughed is, why are they not working? If they're not working because they're on maternity leave, they get maternity pay. If they're entitled in the usual way. If they're not at work because of sick leave, then they get sick pay. If they're not there because of holiday, then they get holiday pay. If they're not at work because there's no work available because of the coronavirus, and they meet the other criteria on the payroll since the 28th of February, then they should be the eligibility to be furloughed.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you follow the steps that we've gone through.
Exactly. So if someone is coming back from maternity, they can be furloughed. Right. Okay. So the last question I've got on this page, again, we did cover it off, but let's just make sure we've got everything answered that could be answered for this. I was placed. So this is from an employee perspective. I was placed on unpaid leave 2 weeks ago. After 4 weeks, I've been told I can apply for redundancy. My employer wants to furlough me. However, due to my personal circumstances, I'm just going to go over to the next page. I would prefer to be made redundant. Is it possible to refuse furlough and still get made redundant?
The answer is yes, it is possible. There's a few sort of niceties around that, depending on what the circumstances are. But generally, as an alternative to being made alternative to the furlough agreement, if you don't want to agree to it, then and the redundancy applies. As I say, there's no obligation, in which case you'll be made redundant. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So Lorraine says, it's my understanding that we can take an additional job to make up the difference as long as it's not during the hours. Yeah, so we've covered that, haven't we? That's absolutely fine.
Your understanding is right. Correct, Lorraine.
Does putting people on furlough null and void the notice periods of employees? Should you make them redundant at the end of the furlough? So that's the scenario that I was asking you about. So they're furloughed, employers don't know how long furlough is going to last. At this point, there's no guarantees about loans to help with cash and supporting the overheads. Could very well be that an employer doesn't have the funds to bring somebody back onto the payroll if the government don't extend this beyond May. There's just so many variables, aren't there? So if a company were to, so say, for example, scenario I'm taking from this question is the furloughing agreement and grant ends at the end of May, but a company doesn't have the cash to pay that person and there's no work because business hasn't wound back up to normal, she says in inverted commas, they therefore would need to make that person redundant. How does notice period sit in that space?
It's exactly the same as it would in any other circumstances, which
period
is 1 week's notice, week of service, or whatever's in the contract if it's more. So it doesn't nullify the notice requirements that an employer would need to give if they're terminating an employee's contract of employment, for whatever reason.
And then another similar question is that if the pay was reduced with agreement during the furlough period, what would the future redundancy amount be worked out at?
So this is a leave of absence. It's not normal. So this shouldn't be regarded as being the normal pay. So if we're looking at redundancy payouts, then you should be looking at what their normal rate of pay would have been.
Yeah.
If we're looking, the only issue will be, well, like anything, something becomes normal after being abnormal when you keep doing it over a period of time. I suppose that becomes the new normality. So if this gets stretched out for a significant period, that might change. But as far as I'm concerned, at the moment, it should be your original salary.
Good. Thank you for that. And actually, the next question also is similar. If an employee pay is reduced with consent and then at a later date made redundant, would the pay be calculated at the salary prior to reduction? So the answer to that is yes, it would be. Correct. And then the final one is also similar, where it's actually reduced hours with consent due to corona. What would happen to maternity pay? Would it be calculated to the normal pay, or would it be calculated based on the shorter hours? But that all depends on that qualifying week or something, doesn't it?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So the question is, if you are on reduced hours and pay with consent to the coronavirus, would maternity pay be calculated at the salary prior to the reduction? Yes, that's what it should be. Okay.
So it's all about remembering that this is an exceptional circumstance and all calculations should be based on the original normal salary.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. So we've got some thank yous. Thank you, everyone. And somebody has also mentioned that they're looking forward to receiving the free personality test and the furlough letter draft. We'll make sure that they are both attached to all correspondence coming out to you. We hope you find those useful. And as Tosh mentioned in the main Q&A, please do call us with any other questions that you have that you haven't felt have been answered.
Yeah, definitely.
Do tune in next Thursday at 1 p.m. We will be literally within the next 10 to 12 hours sending out what we would believe the topics are going to be for next Thursday. And if you have topics that you're interested in, please let us know. I'm just flipping over to the next page, Tosh, just to check if there weren't any other questions. But no, it's more thank you. So thank you to everyone.
So just to be clear, Meeta was just saying about something that's going to go out now. You're going to choose what the next topics are. The point of this is to do something that is actually useful for you, rather than us just jabbering away of what we think it is. You know, we're both professionals in our own right. I'm a solicitor in employment law. Meeta deals with a specialist in recruitment. You know, with both of our heads together and the contacts that we have, and I'm sure we can help you in one way or another. So we're going to give you a list of different types of topics. You're going to choose it, and that's what we're going to talk about next Thursday, 1 o'clock. See you there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tosh. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Take care. Bye. Bye.